He left her for a younger woman. He thought she'd cry, break down, wait for him to come back. But 1 year later, at a fateful party, he saw her, radiant, successful, walking hand in hand with a man he could never measure up to. And in that moment, he realized he hadn't just lost her. He had lost an empire they could have built together. Before we dive into the story, please like this video and leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Your support is what drives us to keep bringing powerful, soul-stirring stories like this one. Let's begin. The sunset poured honey over each leaf. The scent of lavender drifted gently through the air, mingling with the soft strum of an acoustic guitar and the delicate clink of champagne glasses. At the lavender estate, the outdoor gathering unfolded like a dream money could buy. Crisp white tables, twinkling string lights wrapped in floral arches, and carefully painted-on smiles. Marcus Ellington adjusted his collar as he stepped into the garden, with Sierra Blake clinging to his side, phone raised to live stream every second. He was just scanning for a glass of wine when everything stopped. She was there. Celeste Morgan, bathed in golden dusk, her amber wrap dress kissed the deep honey brown of her skin with both grace and quiet defiance. Her hair swept into a high bun, effortless yet regal, and beside her a man, Julian Ward, taller than Marcus, steady, angled slightly toward Celeste, one hand resting lightly at the small of her back, as if he'd always belonged there. Marcus froze. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard her voice, but when it came, not loud, not bitter, just clear enough to tighten something in his chest. "Julian, this is Marcus, my ex-husband." "Marcus, this is Julian, my husband." A second passed, then another. Marcus swallowed hard. The garden suddenly felt silent, even as the music played on. There was no malice in her eyes, no pity either, only the gaze of someone who had walked through hell and survived. He couldn't speak, not because he was shocked, but because Celeste Morgan was no longer the woman he had left behind. She was something else entirely, brighter, stronger, a woman who didn't need him to shine. 1 year earlier, the kitchen at Willow Heights was still warm with familiarity. The coffee on the table was still hot. The lavender bouquet Celeste had replaced that morning was still fresh. And Marcus sat there, unable to meet her eyes. His hands clenched a ceramic mug like it was the only thing keeping him steady. "I don't know how to say this gently, but I've met someone else." Celeste didn't flinch. "Her name is Sierra. She's 24, fun. Her life's full of color. She makes me feel alive again." The woman sitting across from him simply nodded, slowly. No breakdown, no shattered glass, no pleading for an explanation. Just one sentence. "If you're sure, then go." Marcus lingered, as if waiting to be stopped. But Celeste didn't reach out. She didn't perform the role of the abandoned woman needing to be saved. So he left. That night, Celeste sat alone on the bedroom floor. Her eyes were dry, but her body trembled slightly. She had just found out she was pregnant. The test still sat on the bathroom sink. A faint line, a fragile thread of hope in the middle of everything falling apart. But she didn't call Marcus. She didn't call anyone. Because he had made his choice, and she, though aching, had chosen not to beg for what no longer belonged to her. As Marcus drove to his new apartment, as Sierra tossed a pillow at him with a carefree laugh, he had no idea that back in Willow Heights, a woman was breathing through silent contractions, whispering to the air, "Baby, I'm sorry you won't be born into a complete family." 12 months later, Marcus still believed she had just stayed behind. Waiting, hurting, re-watching wedding videos on tear-stained pillows. What he didn't know was that in that very moment, Celeste Morgan had already begun becoming the kind of woman he would never again be worthy to touch. 3 weeks after Marcus left, the house in Willow Heights was hauntingly quiet. His shirt still hung on the bathroom door. The morning coffee mug still sat on the high shelf only Celeste could reach. His scent, that familiar mix of mint and cedar, had faded, but not completely. Celeste didn't play music. She didn't watch sad movies to cry it out. She simply lived, hour by hour, not out of hope, but out of habit. That night, she walked into the bathroom. The pain came suddenly, crashing through her lower abdomen like a violent wave. She grabbed the edge of the sink, her fingers trembling. Blood, more than she expected, so much she couldn't breathe. She sank to the cold tile floor. No screams, no calls for help, just a whisper, faint and breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry." That night, Celeste curled up on the sofa, wrapped in the old throw Marcus had bought during their Colorado trip. She clutched a cream-colored baby onesie, a tiny gift she had ordered online just 3 days ago. It never made it home, because the life inside her was already gone. The next morning, the neighbor still watered their plants. The mailman still delivered letters. The world kept turning, but Celeste Morgan had lost a husband, had lost a child, and had lost the woman she used to be. In that house, she had let go of everything that once tethered her to this life. And yet, in that very same place, between the cracks in the sleepless nights, within the empty hands and hollow heart of a woman brought to nothing, something new began to stir, not suddenly, but real and painfully slow, rebirth. Autumn came, quieter, colder than usual, but in that very chill, Celeste Morgan began doing something no one ever taught her. She practiced breathing again, not to live, but to keep from drowning inside herself. She signed up for a 5 a.m. yoga class, not for aesthetics, not to follow a trend, but because 4:59 was the most dangerous moment of her day, the moment suspended between night and a new morning, between letting go and holding on. On that worn yoga mat, her body trembled slightly, but with every inhale, every held breath, every slow exhale, she was quietly reminding the universe, "I'm still here. I still exist." Then came meditation. Celeste used to think meditation was for people with too much free time, until she realized silence can be the safest place when you have no one left to talk to. One morning, she boarded a flight alone. No announcement, no explanation. She flew straight to Marrakesh, not to find herself, but to create someone entirely new. She wandered through narrow alleyways, thick with spices and colored fabrics. She sat for hours in mint tea houses where no one knew her name. And one sun-drenched afternoon, in a vast open square, she laughed, just once, softly, but it was real, the first time in months. When she returned to Willow Heights, she was no longer the Celeste Marcus had walked away from. She spent the next 3 months building something. She picked up the pieces she'd once left behind. She opened the old notebook filled with scribbled community models and wild, hopeful dreams. And from that, Clarity Impact Consulting was born. No fanfare, no investor pitches, no grand opening banners, just a single email address. But behind it stood a woman who had survived and now wanted to help others truly live. She wasn't waiting to be loved again. She was learning to love herself, not for praise, not for validation, but because she deserved to. And for the first time, after everything, Celeste Morgan finally started to believe it. Marcus Ellington's new apartment sat on the 17th floor. Glass walls, hardwood floors, everything spotless, almost to the point of feeling sterile. He had once told himself that leaving Celeste was necessary, a way to feel alive again. Beside him now was Sierra Blake, 24, an influencer with 3 social media channels, 7 beauty campaigns, and a ring he never actually wanted to give her. Every morning, Sierra woke up to find her angles. She spoke to her phone more than to him. Her smile, always perfectly lit, perfectly framed, never real. "Babe, can you take a step back? The light's hitting my eyes." "Babe, don't sit there. It messes up the symmetry." "Babe, did you like my story yet?" Marcus smiled, nodded, scrolled, but he wasn't seeing anything anymore. The apartment was filled with lighting equipment. And yet he had never felt this dark inside. One evening, Sierra wrapped up a 40-minute live stream, reviewing 5 different eye creams. Marcus sat 3 meters away, eating cold leftovers no one asked him about. As she turned to adjust the ring light, he opened Instagram, almost by reflex, and ended up on Nina Morgan's page, Celeste's younger sister. He didn't follow Celeste, but he knew what he was looking for. A trace, a glimpse, a window back into the life he had thrown away. That night, Sierra stepped out of the bathroom, a sheet mask still drying on her face. "Do you think I should get layered bangs?" Marcus looked up, his eyes hollow. "Your hair always looks great." The words came automatically, soulless, weightless. He turned to the bed. On the ceiling, a faint pink glow from a heart-shaped nightlight pulsed in the dark. Marcus lay still and for the first time truly asked himself, "What is Celeste doing now? Does she ever think of me? Or has she already crossed into a world I can no longer touch?" He didn't know the answer, but he was right about one thing. She had gone far. Not in distance, but in the cruelest way adulthood reveals itself. Celeste Morgan had grown beyond him, past the reach of a man who once didn't have the courage to stay. Saturday noon. The sun was soft. Marcus stood outside a furniture boutique on the main avenue, waiting for Sierra. She had gone inside to live stream with a new skincare partner. He stood by the curb, hands in his pockets, a strange unease fluttering in his chest. And then a sleek black SUV pulled up. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. Celeste Morgan, her hair tied up effortlessly, sunglasses resting casually on her head. She wore a fitted olive jumpsuit, a cold brew tea in hand. She moved like the breeze, light, effortless. No highlighter, no bold lipstick. And yet she glowed brighter than anyone Marcus had ever seen. She didn't look around. She didn't check her reflection. She didn't need validation to take up space. And then, the moment that couldn't be avoided, their eyes met, just for a heartbeat. No words. No one stepped forward. Marcus stood frozen, like the wind had hit him square in the chest. Not from anger, not even from longing, but because she had truly stepped beyond the orbit of his world. Celeste looked at him. No surprise, no avoidance, just the gaze of someone who knew their past and was no longer controlled by it. Then she smiled, softly, not mocking, not pitying, just the kind of smile you give a stranger. Someone who once passed through your life and now only exists in the quiet distance of memory. Then she turned away. Marcus didn't know how long he stood there. Sierra came bouncing out, waving excitedly. "Babe, I just closed the deal with that eye cream brand. Ready for lunch?" He nodded, but his eyes lingered on the direction Celeste had disappeared into. And for the first time, something strange stirred inside him. Not quite regret, not exactly jealousy, something closer to fear. The kind of fear that whispers, "You just lost something that you'll never be able to reach again." That evening, Marcus ducked into Brass and Birch, the old cafe where he and Celeste used to work side by side, back when she would sketch ideas on napkins in ink. The wooden table by the window was still there, the coffee was still bold and overpriced. But this time he sat alone, empty, as if waiting for something that would never return. A familiar voice called out behind him, "Ellington, long time no see." It was Troy Bennett, an old colleague from the corporate days, polished, sharp, and always the kind of man who knew things about people before they told you themselves. They shook hands, swapped pleasantries. Marcus forced a smile, but Troy tilted his head, studying him. "You haven't heard, have you? About Celeste?" Marcus gripped his coffee cup. "She's doing well?" Troy laughed, the kind of laugh that said that's an understatement. "Well, she's living larger than all of us combined. Just got back from Spain. She's slated to speak at a high-level UN forum. Got tapped as a global strategic advisor for Vireo Energy. She's traveling with her husband, Julian Ward. You've probably heard of him." Marcus froze. He had heard the name. He had Googled it after their silent run-in on Haven Row, but hearing it now, from someone else's lips, dripping with awe, it felt like swallowing stones. Troy took a sip of his coffee. "I still remember back then, Celeste talking about energy equity, community consulting, non-profit advisory models. I thought she was just dreaming too big. Didn't expect she'd actually do it." Marcus said nothing. He remembered the nights she stayed up building pitch decks, rehearsing her slides. The plans he'd brushed off with a careless, "You're doing too much, babe." It all returned now, like a film in slow motion. But he wasn't the lead anymore. He was just the man who once interrupted a future leader, because he lacked the imagination to believe in her. Troy stood, patting Marcus lightly on the shoulder. "You let go of an extraordinary woman, Ellington. But hey, who knew, right? People only see someone's potential when it's no longer meant for them." The 17th floor apartment overlooked the city lights, glittering, vibrant, picture-perfect in every frame of a story. Sierra Blake was live-streaming again, her face flawless, the ring light reflecting perfectly in her eyes. "And that's the 5th step in my nighttime routine. Don't forget to like, share, and use code Blake20, everyone." She waved, ended the stream, then let her shoulders drop and pulled her hair free from its clip. The lights went out. Reality returned. Marcus lay on his side, facing away from her. The laptop screen glowed faintly beside him, an untitled document open, untouched. He wasn't typing, he wasn't reading, just staring into the void, as if some invisible fracture was slowly splitting behind his forehead. "You're drifting again." Sierra spoke, trying to keep her voice soft. "Lately, you're here but not here, even when you're right in front of me." Marcus turned, forcing a smile. "It's nothing. Probably just work." "It's not work." Her tone sharpened. "It's Celeste, isn't it?" He froze. Sierra propped herself up on one elbow, her gaze no longer soft. "I'm not stupid, Marcus. I saw you followed her sister. I saw your LinkedIn searches. I saw how your eyes dart away every time I bring up a party or an invite. You think I don't notice?" Marcus didn't respond, didn't deny, didn't defend, because somewhere deep down, he realized he had been caught living a life. He no longer knew how he ended up choosing. Sierra let out a dry laugh. "She's your past, Marcus. An example. Got that? Not your present, not your future. She's history. And I'm not playing the side character in whatever nostalgic movie you're replaying." He opened his mouth, but no words came. None that felt honest enough. She stood and walked out to the balcony, closing the glass door behind her. Inside, Marcus sat still on the bed. On one side, Sierra's phone, glowing with 40,000 followers, waiting for her next video. On the other, a photo of Celeste at a global youth summit, standing among emerging world leaders. He had quietly saved it from Clarity Impact Consulting's public page. Sierra was right. Celeste was the past. But the problem was, that past was making his present feel hollow, and with each passing night in this bed, he was forced to confront a truth too heavy to name. He didn't leave Celeste because he stopped loving her. He left because he was afraid of the greatness rising quietly inside her. And now, it had caught fire, brilliant, unreachable, and never meant for him. The air at the Lavender estate was perfumed with lavender, white wine, and late-blooming roses. A cello played softly in the background, weaving itself into the refined murmur of elegantly dressed guests. Stylish, but never gaudy. Marcus and Sierra entered through a flower-draped archway. She wore a coral red dress, phone still glowing, doing a slow pan to capture the scenery. He followed behind, fastening the button on his blazer, eyes scanning the crowd, looking for her. He didn't have to look long. Celeste Morgan stood near a cluster of violet hydrangeas. She wore a pale yellow wrap dress, silk catching the breeze. The golden hour light kissed her cheek, creating a cinematic glow, as if someone had deliberately lit her for film. And beside her, Julian Ward. He wore a navy suit, open collar, no tie. One hand rested lightly at Celeste's back, like they had stood that way for a lifetime. Marcus stopped in his tracks. She wasn't alone. She wasn't tentative. She wasn't scanning the room for anyone to witness her. She belonged here. At the next table, Olivia Chen leaned toward Dr. Grant Hill. "Did you hear Julian Ward is speaking at the UN? Celeste Morgan's co-hosting. I heard she's advising 3 different governments right now." Unbelievable. Just 2 years ago, she was still running an independent consultancy. Marcus wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but every word struck him like glass shattering on stone. He clutched his champagne flute, but didn't drink. His throat was dry, his hand cold, though it was spring. At that moment, Celeste tilted her head and laughed at something someone said. Not at him, not anymore. She wasn't just another guest. She was the quiet center of the room, commanding presence without chasing the spotlight. Julian leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She laughed, deep, soft, unforced, not the laugh of someone who once lived in shadows. Marcus suddenly felt invisible in a place that used to feel like his world. Sierra stood beside him, snapping photos, talking about the perfect ambient lighting for her next story. But her voice rang hollow now, background noise fading into a deeper silence. And in that silence, Marcus finally understood. It wasn't Celeste who changed. It was that she had become someone he was never meant to hold on to. Not because she left, but because she had outgrown the world he once made her small in. Marcus took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the champagne glass, then released it. He stepped forward. He didn't know why, only that if he didn't, the questions clawing at his mind would eat him alive. Celeste was chatting with two older guests. Julian had stepped away a few minutes earlier to speak with the event organizers. Marcus waited, and when she turned back, their eyes truly met for the first time. "Celeste," he said, his voice slightly shaky, louder than necessary. "It's been a while." She tilted her head gently, a soft, polite smile, like a quiet nod across time. "Marcus, Sierra, it's good to see you both." Sierra gave a quick nod, her eyes scanning for better lighting to capture her next selfie. Marcus didn't smile. He looked at Celeste, really looked. You look different." Celeste remained calm. Time has a way of doing that to people. I heard you're doing well." "Spain, right?" "Yes," she replied. "Next stop's Tokyo. Julian's giving a keynote at the Global Energy Summit. I'm going with him." There was no boasting, no pride, just facts, as if she'd always belonged to that larger world, and Marcus had simply never been capable of seeing it. His voice dropped, a confession that felt out of place in a garden party draped in elegance. "I thought you'd fall apart after I left. I thought you'd break." Celeste looked at him, not with anger, not with pity, just truth and distance. "I did fall apart, but not because of you. I broke over things you never had the patience to ask about." Marcus stood silent. Sierra stood beside him, pretending to fix her hair. She could feel the temperature drop between them, but had no place in this exchange. Julian returned, placing a gentle hand on Celeste's back. The same place Marcus once knew by heart. She turned to Julian and smiled, a smile reserved for someone who stayed. Marcus swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "not for leaving, but for never really seeing you." Celeste nodded, as if she had forgiven him, long, long ago. Not to free him, but to keep herself from ever being pulled backward again. After walking away from Celeste and Julian, Marcus headed straight to the bar. The lights no longer shimmered. Every laugh, every clink of a glass, every silky jazz note morphed into sharp echoes. "I thought she'd fall apart." The words still rang in his head, but now they sounded ridiculous. A hand touched his shoulder. Nina Morgan, Celeste's younger sister. Youthful face but eyes that carried weight, uncannily like her sister's. "It's been a while, Marcus." He tried to smile, awkward, strained. "You still look the same, strong, like Celeste." Nina took a slow sip of her drink, then said without preamble, "I know you're not going to ask, so I'll just tell you. My sister had a miscarriage after you left." She didn't raise her voice, but to Marcus, it hit like wind slamming into a glass house. "What? Did you say?" "A month after you moved out, I was the one who took her to the hospital." Marcus's fingers tightened around his glass until his knuckles turned white. Nina didn't flinch, she didn't accuse, she simply continued, like stating a fact that everyone should have known, but the one who needed to hear it most was never around when it happened. Nobody knew, just the family. Celeste kept it to herself. Even the pain. "You know, the cruelest part wasn't that you left. It was that you left behind no space for care to come back in. Marcus turned away, struggling to keep his composure, but inside something was splintering, not loud, just steady, like a fracture spreading through concrete, slow, and then all at once. "The baby," he whispered. "Was it a boy? Or a girl?" Nina shook her head softly. She never said, only that she named the baby Grace. Marcus closed his eyes. That name, it landed like a blow to the chest. He had once lived beside a woman strong enough to love him, to forgive him, and eventually, strong enough to rebuild herself without him. "She was once your family," Nina said, "and now she's built a new home, with someone grown enough to stay." Marcus didn't speak again. He couldn't. Everything he should have known, everything he should have heard, had arrived too late. The party at the Lavender Estate had reached its golden hour. The overhead string lights now glowed softly. The music shifted into slower, more elegant instrumentals. The whole space shimmered in honeytones, warm, graceful, perfect for remembering beautiful things that no longer belonged to you. Marcus sat alone on a chair near the floral fence. No one noticed him. No one called his name. He had become an uninvited shadow in the very story that once bore his name. At the center, Celeste spoke with a group of international guests. Julian stood beside her, one hand resting on the back of her chair. A small gesture, but one that said everything. Celeste tilted her head as she listened, smiling occasionally, nodding with quiet ease. Every movement was fluid, composed, and utterly complete, with no need for Marcus to be part of it. A young woman passed by, plucking a wine glass from a server's tray. She whispered to her companion, "She has presence, you know. I still can't believe she was once divorced. Just look at Celeste Morgan." Marcus's hand clenched slightly. Everyone knew she had risen. Everyone, except him, when he still had the chance to stand beside her. He used to think he was the one who walked away. Now he realized he was the one who had been left behind. Not by anyone else, but by his own shallowness, his own failure to see what was growing right in front of him. The name Marcus Ellington was now just a faded footnote, in a chapter that had long turned its page. Sierra returned, holding a pale pink cocktail, her expression puzzled. "Are you okay? You seem like you're not really here." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then said, so softly only he could hear it, "I'm not really." Evening settled in. The party still sparkled with laughter and life, but Marcus had no role left in the story he once thought was his. As the last of the sunset faded, the Lavender Estate was bathed in the golden glow of 100 soft lights. The party had shifted into stillness. The piano slowed, laughter dimmed into hushed, intimate conversations, and amidst all that elegant motion, Celeste Morgan stepped out of the spotlight. She walked straight toward Marcus, who sat beneath the arching shadow of a lilac tree. No one followed her, no invitation, no script. Just a woman who had made peace with her past and had come to say goodbye properly. Marcus looked up, not surprised, as if somewhere deep down he had known she would come. Celeste stood before him in silence. She didn't look away, she didn't blink. "Nina told you, didn't she?" Marcus nodded. "Grace." The name left his lips like an apology that no longer needed explaining. Celeste smiled, soft, sad, but no longer shattered. "I don't blame you. You didn't know, because I never let you know. But that child, even without a chance to live, taught me more than anyone who stayed ever did." Marcus lowered his eyes. For the first time, he felt he had no right to speak, only the obligation to listen. Celeste sat down beside him, not too close, not too far. Between them was a silence, filled with everything that could no longer be said. "Grace," she continued, "wasn't just the baby I lost. She was the version of me I never had the courage to become. I survived, not because you came back, but because I stopped waiting for you to." Marcus looked at her, his eyes red but dry, because he knew tears couldn't fix what had already healed without him. He asked, out of habit, grasping at the last thread of a role he no longer played. "Are you happy?" Celeste nodded. "Very, but not because I found someone new, because I finally found myself again." She stood, smoothed the hem of her dress, and looked at him one last time. "Goodbye, Marcus. I'm not angry anymore. I just don't need you. In any chapter that comes next." She turned and walked away, leaving him there beneath the tree, alone with a name that was never spoken, when it still mattered. Celeste walked slowly along the stone path, her golden silk dress fluttering gently with the evening breeze. No one noticed she had just stepped away from a conversation, because everyone had grown used to her moving through the world. With complete command of her own steps, Marcus watched her, the entire garden blurred, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all faded, leaving only the image of a woman who once belonged to him, but now shone like a distant star, free in her own orbit. Julian stood beneath a cluster of paper lanterns, holding 2 glasses of ginger lemonade. He saw her approaching and handed her one, no questions asked. Celeste accepted it. No words, just a quiet smile. Then they kissed. Not deep, not performative. Just the kind of kiss shared by 2 people who have nothing to prove to the world anymore. Marcus felt himself split in 2. He had never seen Celeste like this. No longer the woman trying to be loved, but a woman chosen every day by a man strong enough to stand beside her. Not to overshadow, not to hide, just to stand with her. Julian gently placed a hand at her waist, the same place Marcus once knew by heart. They didn't rush, they didn't need to leave, because they already belonged, exactly where they were. Marcus remained still. No one noticed, no one called him back, and in the quiet absence of all things familiar, he finally understood Celeste Morgan had become. A woman of another time, a time that no longer needed him. No room left for regret, no echo left for late promises. Marcus sat alone on a wooden chair near the edge of the garden fence, just beyond the reach of the lantern light. His glass was empty. No one came to refill it. No one came at all. The night breeze rustled gently through the trees, stirring the silk ribbons strung above. In the distance, the acoustic music had slowed into a soft ballad, warm, slow, tinged with melancholy. He looked toward the center of the garden, where Celeste and Julian stood talking with a small group of guests. She placed a hand on her chest and laughed gently. Julian nodded, glancing at her now and then, like she was the only map he needed in a crowded room. Marcus exhaled slowly, and then his monologue began. Not aloud, but as thoughts breaking quietly inside him. "I used to think I was the one who walked away, the one with the power, the one who made the choice. But the truth is, I was just a man who never had the courage to stay. I left a woman at the very moment she needed shelter the most, and now I see she didn't just survive, she blossomed in a way that makes it hard for me to even stand close without feeling small. I gave up a woman who could have built an empire beside me for a few years of filtered smiles and long silences after every story post. I thought she'd fall apart, but it was me. I collapsed slowly. Unnoticed dash, because no one cared anymore." Laughter echoed from a nearby table. Celeste turned her head, not toward him, and yet her smile stayed steady. Not cold, not bitter, just distant. A smile that belonged to a life, with no space left for the past. Marcus whispered, only to himself, "You didn't just move on. You took flight." And I, the man who once held her hand through her earliest days, I'm now just an observer, watching her finish a story I never had the strength to stay for. Above, the stars began to scatter across the sky. A few guests quietly made their exit. Celeste and Julian turned and walked inside, fingers intertwined. Marcus remained. He didn't get up. He didn't call after her. He didn't hope. He just sat and listened to the most beautiful ending of a story he no longer had a role in. She didn't just survive, she rose and left him Forever dash, in a chapter, she no longer needed to reread. Not everyone who leaves first is the one who wins, and not everyone who stays is the one who's weak. Celeste Morgan didn't scream, she didn't beg, she didn't seek revenge, she simply stayed silent and grew, through pain, through loss, and through everything Marcus never cared enough to notice, while he still had the chance. If you've ever lost someone you never truly understood, or if you are the one who was left behind but chose to keep going, not for anyone else, but for yourself, leave a comment. I choose to survive and become the best version of myself. And if this story made you rethink, a person you let go of, an apology you never said, or your own quiet journey after something inside you shattered, please share this video, because somewhere out there, there's still a Marcus who doesn't understand, and a Celeste learning how to rise without needing to be acknowledged.